Have you ever wondered why someone who claims to love you seems to dole out affection like a miser counting coins? The scarcity principle reveals a dark truth about how avoidants withhold love to control you, and understanding this psychological manipulation could save your sanity. When someone makes love feel rare and precious by giving it sparingly, they create an artificial shortage that makes you crave it more desperately than you ever thought possible. Think about how diamonds became precious. They're actually quite common, but clever marketing made them seem rare and essential for love. Avoidant partners use the same trick with their emotions, creating artificial scarcity where there should be abundance. This isn't accidental behavior. It's a calculated pattern rooted in deep psychological programming that turns relationships into power games. The human brain has evolved to value what seems scarce and chase what feels just out of reach. When Blair Waldorf from Gossip Girl played hard to get, she understood this principle instinctively. She knew that making herself seem unavailable would increase her perceived value. But what happens when this isn't just dating strategy, but a core part of someone's personality? What occurs when withholding becomes the default setting for how someone expresses love? Avoidant attachment styles develop in childhood when showing emotion becomes dangerous or unrewarded. These individuals learn that vulnerability leads to pain, so they construct elaborate defenses around their hearts. As adults, they unconsciously recreate the emotional desert of their childhood, making others beg for the emotional water they desperately control. But here's where it gets twisted. They don't just withhold love to protect themselves. They withhold it because scarcity gives them power. The confirmation bias kicks in hard when you're dealing with an avoidant partner. Your brain starts looking for evidence that you're finally breaking through their walls, interpreting tiny crumbs of affection as major breakthroughs. A simple text message becomes a love letter. A brief moment of vulnerability feels like winning the lottery. Your mind tricks you into believing that their emotional unavailability makes the rare moments of connection more meaningful and valuable. This creates a psychological trap more sophisticated than any conscious manipulation. The intermittent reinforcement schedule, random, unpredictable rewards, is the most addictive pattern known to psychology. Casinos use it to keep people pulling slot machine levers. Avoidant partners use it to keep you pulling the levers of their heart, hoping the next pull will hit the emotional jackpot you've been craving. But the cruelest part isn't the withholding itself. It's how they make you complicit in your own emotional starvation. They train you to be grateful for scraps while convincing you that asking for more makes you needy or demanding. Soon you're policing your own emotional needs, becoming the prison guard of your own heart. If you want to better understand someone's attachment style, see the link in the description to one of the most popular books on attachment theory. Picture a woman named Sarah who meets someone at her friend's wedding. He's charming, mysterious, and gives her just enough attention to keep her intrigued, but never enough to feel secure. Their first few dates are magical. He's present, engaging, and seems genuinely interested. Then something shifts. His texts become shorter, his calls less frequent. When she asks about it, he says he's just busy with work. But something in his tone suggests she's being too clingy by even mentioning it. Sarah starts analyzing every interaction, looking for signs that he still cares. When he finally calls after 3 days of silence, the relief floods through her system like a drug. She feels grateful for his attention in a way that surprises her. She's an independent, successful person, but somehow she's become a detective searching for clues about his feelings. The scarcity of his emotional availability has made each small gesture feel monumentally important. Weeks pass, and the pattern becomes clear, but never predictable. Just when Sarah decides she's had enough, he shows up with flowers and explanations. Just when she starts to feel secure again, he pulls back. The push-pull dynamic creates an emotional roller coaster that she mistakes for passion. Her friends tell her he's not that into her, but the intensity of the rare moments when he is fully present convinces her they're wrong. But here's what Sarah doesn't realize. This isn't about her worth or his busy schedule. This is about control through scarcity. Like Joe Goldberg from the Netflix series You, who creates situations where he becomes the solution to problems he secretly caused, her partner is creating emotional drought so he can control when and how much water she receives. The difference is that avoidant partners often don't realize they're doing this. It's become their unconscious relationship operating system. The availability heuristic makes Sarah remember the peak moments more vividly than the valleys of neglect. Her brain gives more weight to the dramatic highs and emotional breakthroughs than to the consistent pattern of withdrawal. She starts believing that love is supposed to be hard-won, that easy affection somehow means less than affection that comes at great emotional cost. This cognitive distortion keeps her trapped in a cycle where she's constantly trying to earn what should be freely given. One evening, Sarah's partner finally opens up about his childhood, a moment of vulnerability that feels like striking gold after months of emotional mining. But even this revelation becomes another tool of scarcity. He shares just enough of his pain to make her feel special and chosen, then retreats behind his walls again. The trauma becomes an excuse for the pattern rather than a reason to break it. Sarah finds herself tiptoeing around his past, making excuses for his present behavior and sacrificing her own emotional needs on the altar of his childhood wounds. The sunk cost fallacy enters the picture like an uninvited guest who refuses to leave. Sarah has invested so much time and emotional energy trying to crack this code that walking away feels like admitting failure. Every small breakthrough feels like proof that her patience and understanding are finally paying off. She doesn't realize that she's become like someone trying to get water from an empty well, convinced that if she just keeps digging, eventually she'll hit the spring. Months later, Sarah meets Emily Cooper from Emily in Paris at a coffee shop, a friend of a friend who radiates the kind of confident energy that Sarah remembers having before this relationship began. Emily talks about her own dating experiences with such lightness and joy that Sarah realizes how heavy her own romantic life has become. The contrast is stark and painful. Sarah has been living on emotional rations while convincing herself that abundance would somehow cheapen the experience. The story reaches its climax when Sarah finally confronts her partner about the pattern. His response reveals the full scope of the scarcity principle in action. He doesn't deny the pattern. Instead, he flips it. He tells her that her need for consistency and reassurance is suffocating him, that real love shouldn't need constant validation. He's taken her completely reasonable need for emotional security and reframed it as a character flaw. The conversation leaves Sarah questioning her own perception of reality and wondering if she really is too needy. But something clicks into place for Sarah during that conversation. She realizes that she's been playing a game where the rules keep changing, where the prize for winning is permission to keep playing. The scarcity he's created around his love isn't making it more valuable. It's making the relationship itself worthless. Love isn't supposed to be rationed like wartime supplies. It's meant to flow freely between people who choose each other every day, not just when the mood strikes them or when they need something. The resolution comes not with a dramatic confrontation, but with Sarah's quiet decision to stop participating in her own emotional impoverishment. She doesn't try to convince him to change or explain why his behavior is hurtful. She simply begins treating herself with the consistency and care that she's been begging him to provide. The artificial scarcity loses its power when you stop believing that crumbs are a feast. Now that the story has revealed how scarcity operates in relationships, it's time to understand how to protect yourself from this psychological manipulation. The first step is recognizing that consistent emotional availability isn't boring or clingy. It's the foundation of healthy love. When someone makes you feel like you're asking for too much by wanting basic emotional security, they're gaslighting you into accepting less than you deserve. Start paying attention to your own emotional state throughout the week. Notice when you feel anxious about someone's feelings toward you, when you find yourself analyzing texts for hidden meanings, or when you feel grateful for basic respect and kindness. These are signs that artificial scarcity might be operating in your relationship. Healthy love doesn't require constant detective work or emotional archaeology to uncover buried feelings. The anchoring bias makes us accept the first piece of information as our baseline for normal behavior. If someone starts a relationship by being inconsistently available, your brain adjusts to accept this as standard operating procedure. But you can reset your anchor by consciously remembering what healthy emotional availability looks like. Think about friendships where people respond consistently, show up when they say they will, and don't make you guess about their feelings toward you. Create a feelings journal where you track your emotional state in the relationship over time. This isn't about becoming obsessive. It's about gathering data to counteract the cognitive biases that make you minimize patterns of emotional unavailability. When you see the evidence written down, it becomes much harder for your brain to explain away consistent patterns of withholding behavior as isolated incidents or misunderstandings. Set clear internal boundaries about what consistent emotional availability means to you. This isn't about giving ultimatums or trying to control someone else's behavior. It's about knowing your own standards and being willing to honor them. If someone can't meet your baseline needs for security and connection, that's valuable information about compatibility, not evidence that your needs are wrong or excessive. Practice expressing your emotional needs without apologizing for having them. The language you use matters enormously. Instead of saying, "I'm sorry if this sounds needy, but," try, "I thrive in relationships where." This reframes your needs as preferences and standards rather than character flaws or impositions. People who are right for you will appreciate your clarity, not resent it. Learn to distinguish between someone who struggles with vulnerability but is actively working on it versus someone who uses their struggles as a permanent excuse for emotional unavailability. The difference lies in their response when you express your needs. Someone genuinely working on themselves will take responsibility and make efforts to change patterns. Someone using scarcity for control will make you feel guilty for having needs in the first place. Develop your own sources of emotional security and validation that don't depend on another person's mood or availability. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally self-sufficient to the point of not needing connection. It means having a strong enough sense of self that you don't mistake emotional crumbs for a full meal. The more secure you become in yourself, the less appealing artificial scarcity becomes. Notice how you feel in your body when you're with someone versus when you're apart from them. Healthy relationships should generally make you feel more relaxed and secure, not more anxious and uncertain. If you consistently feel more peaceful when someone isn't around than when they are, that's your nervous system telling you something important about the dynamic. The contrast principle makes us value things more when they're compared to something worse. Don't let previous bad relationships make you grateful for mediocre treatment in current ones. Just because someone isn't actively cruel doesn't mean they're actively kind. Raise your standards based on what's possible in healthy relationships, not what you've survived in unhealthy ones. Stop trying to earn love through perfect behavior, incredible patience, or exceptional understanding. Love that has to be earned through performance isn't love at all. It's a transaction. Real love is given freely and consistently, not doled out as rewards for good behavior or withdrawn as punishment for having human needs and emotions. Practice the art of emotional abundance in your own life. Be generous with your appreciation, affection, and attention toward friends, family, and yourself. When you live from a place of emotional abundance, artificial scarcity becomes obviously unappealing. You start to recognize the difference between someone who shares their inner world freely and someone who makes you pay admission to their emotional museum. Learn to trust your instincts about emotional inconsistency, even when you can't prove anything is wrong. The recency effect makes us remember recent positive interactions more vividly than overall patterns, which is why intermittent reinforcement works so well. Keep the big picture in mind, rather than letting one good day erase weeks of emotional distance or unavailability. Finally, remember that choosing to leave a relationship where love is artificially scarce isn't giving up on love. It's making space for the kind of love that doesn't require you to constantly prove you deserve it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in your own emotional starvation, even when someone tries to convince you that hunger is a sign of devotion. Understanding the scarcity principle in relationships isn't just about protecting yourself from manipulation. It's about recognizing your fundamental worth and refusing to accept less than the emotional abundance you deserve. When you truly grasp how artificial scarcity operates, you begin to see it everywhere. In friendships where people withhold approval to maintain power, in family dynamics where love comes with conditions, and in romantic relationships where consistency is treated as optional rather than essential. The most powerful realization is that you don't have to convince anyone to love you properly. People who are capable of healthy love will offer it freely and consistently because that's how emotionally healthy people operate. Those who can't or won't provide basic emotional security aren't bad people, but they're not your people. There's no amount of patience, understanding, or perfect behavior that can transform someone who operates from scarcity into someone who operates from abundance. Your job isn't to heal anyone else's attachment wounds or teach them how to love. Your job is to recognize love when it shows up authentically and to have enough self-respect to walk away when it doesn't. This requires cultivating such a strong relationship with yourself that artificial scarcity becomes obviously unacceptable rather than mysteriously attractive. The path forward involves surrounding yourself with people who make love feel abundant rather than scarce, who show up consistently rather than sporadically, and who don't make you guess about their feelings or intentions. These relationships exist, and they're not boring or lacking in passion. They're simply built on security rather than anxiety, on generosity rather than scarcity. Take action today by examining your closest relationships through the lens of abundance versus scarcity. Notice where you feel emotionally well-fed versus where you feel like you're surviving on scraps. Trust what your nervous system tells you about safety and security. Choose abundance, choose consistency, and choose people who choose you back without making it feel like winning the lottery every single time. Your heart deserves nothing less than the full feast of genuine, freely given love.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to better understand avoidance, relationships, and psychological biases, then subscribe to our channel, because you deserve beautiful relationships.